market is changing, right? And if we do these transformations, we change the way of work. What do leaders need to do differently if we want to have a faster paced market? Maybe we introduce things like Scrum or Safe or Less or whatever that definitely makes the leaders act in a different way. So what do they need to do differently?
Well, I think there's a couple of things I like to share with people. And in the new way of working, right, this agile way of working, this way that's focused more on customer satisfaction, focus on higher quality, right, we have to kind of recognize that the people who are closest to the work have the most information about the work, and we wanted to give them the most opportunities to make most of the decisions. Notice I didn't say all, right? I'm not saying that people closest to work get to make all the decisions, right? But we want to try to figure out how do we give those people closest to the work the information they need so they can make most of the decisions because they're closest to it, right? They can respond to it faster. So that's one thing. So one thing is, how do you communicate what you know as a leader to the team so that they can make these decisions as well or perhaps better than you? Okay. Another thing that I would recommend to leaders today is let go of the results, and that means you're going to have to trust your team, right? And by letting go of the results and letting the team own it, then you focus on the leader of making sure that they know the right things to make the right decisions, and they have the environment that will allow them to succeed. Now, there's a caveat to this, right? And trusting your team is important, and our CEO says this all the time. Trust is given where trust is earned.
Yeah.
And so if you have a team that has not been very trustworthy, then we've got to get them to that point first so that you can entrust them with more responsibilities. So the way that here's the challenge, right? In order to have trust, you have to make yourself vulnerable. So you're going to have to let go of something little and see how they do. And if they do great, then you give them a little bit more, and you give them a little bit more.
Because otherwise you might have this vicious circle, like I don't want to give them, they don't deliver, so we keep things too compact and too distant, so then we don't have this velocity needed in this faster paced environment.
And for the leader, it becomes really stressful because now you have to manage everything, right? And I know managers and leaders get paid more than employees and staff, but I don't think they get paid that much more to manage absolutely everything, right? And so, like I said, let go of the results, empower the team to make most of these decisions, not all, give them the information they need, and give them what they need to succeed. So I think that's one of the Agile principles. Give people the environment that they need so that they can succeed. So.
About leaders, so now because they changed the way they work, they changed a bit the environment, so typically what do managers do? They stay in meetings, right?
Yeah.
So what would you recommend, or how would you teach a leader to deal with these many meetings they have and they had, and everybody is used to having that person in a meeting, but now they need to be maybe closer to the teams, to the people, and they should adjust their schedule to have this time as well. So what would you recommend them?
Well, I mean, leaders need time to think. And that's one of the lessons I learned a long time ago from one of my mentors. And he used to block out, and here's a tip, right? He used to block out hours in his schedule, and he'd have it as a meeting. But he told me, he's like, listen, I have these meetings, but they're just my thinking time because I need time to think. Yeah. And he says, for you, Carl, he says, you can come and interrupt me during my thinking time. So that's one thing, like block out time in your schedule so you have time to think and do your work. Hopefully many managers already know this. The other thing is, if you don't have to be at the meeting, don't be there. Right? In a lot of meetings, sometimes people invite managers either as required or optional, but they don't really need to be there. It's kind of I need to invite the boss so that the boss knows I'm doing something. If you don't need to be there, don't be there. So just say, no, I'm not going to make it. Now, the next thing I would say is, if you are going to be in a meeting as a leader, is make sure you have a clear purpose. Like, what is the purpose of this meeting? Why are we interrupting people for an hour? We're bringing together 10 people. What's the purpose of it? And is it worth bringing 10 people there? Right? Are we going to get more value out of it rather than not having it at all, or maybe having less people? So if you don't have a clear purpose, I would ask the person who's either requesting your presence to define a clear purpose, like a clear outcome, or just don't go. Right? If someone can't tell you what the purpose of it is, it's not worth it going. The next thing I would say is there has to be an agenda, a reasonable set of steps that you can read as a leader to say, okay, by the end of this meeting, we'll achieve this purpose. And if whoever's inviting you doesn't have an agenda that looks realistic, either don't go or work with that person to try to make it better. Right?